Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that I've been doing for a little while now, and I find that it works quite well for me. Something I recommend to a lot of guys out there who are looking at longevity, shoulder health, things like that, is when you max out on your bench, that's when you do your wider work, right? I stay way inside the rings outside of that, and a lot of this max benching is pinkies on the rings. Some of it might be ring fingers on the rings. And I'll eventually even experiment with going even wider. But then all of my rep work, right, all my volume training is done close grip. Okay. I might make an exception for that for some floor press later. But my rep work is generally done close grip. And if I do anything wide grip that's not a 1 rep max, it's going to be a floor press. It's going to be board work. It's going to be something like that. Now, a lot of people would say, well, why is that? Well, first of all, people who have shoulder problems over the years from heavy benching, it's usually all the really wide benching they do. Okay. And in our mind, because we can oftentimes, and for me it's very, very little difference, but for a lot of guys there's a big difference. I'd say in a best case scenario, I get 5 pounds out of going wider. It's just for me, the way I'm built. I have long arms. My range of motion is always going to be long. So for a lot of guys though, the wider grip gives them a lot more strength, as we would measure strength being weight on the bar. Okay, but what happens is that they're moving the weight a shorter distance, right? They're technically doing less work. That's why they can bench more weight, because we're cutting the range of motion way down. Right, you're cutting the range of motion way down, and in some cases you get a little more stabilizer involvement, things like biceps. Right, but the main difference is the range of motion, particularly for anyone who arches. And I would say if you're doing a real wide grip and you don't arch, you're really going to create some problems for yourself in the long term. Like wide grip, flat back benching over time is just going to chew your shoulders up. It's going to chew your shoulders up. I do not recommend that you do it. But the thing is, the wider grip reduces range of motion. And it's also harder on the shoulder joints. And I get some people who say, well, closed grip really hurts my shoulders. It's like, well, you're the exception to the rule. And if you're the exception to the rule, you need to avoid the things that hurt your shoulders. And I get that. But for the overwhelming majority of people, it's the other direction. And that's the funny thing when it comes to our personal anatomies is, there is some differences. There are anatomical differences. There are certain ranges of motion that my structure doesn't allow me to do correctly. And no amount of mobility work in the world will change that. We accept those things. But in the case of most people, the closer grip is easier on your shoulders, particularly guys with slightly longer arms. Guys with really short arms, it may not be. But if you have average or longer arms, which I have longer than average arms for my height, you're going to generally experience more inflammation, more pain, stuff in your shoulder over time benching wider. So the point is, why do we max out? We max out to learn to maximize strength, to find our leverages that let us move the most weight, to find our groove that lets us lift the most weight. Okay, there's a reason even on conjugate why we rotate through all these different lifts is to learn to find all your best levers in any position, so that at every position, every strength curve, you find your best leverages, because you ramp to a max all the time, and you have to find those sweet spots. Okay, it teaches you to do that. But when it comes to rep work, why are we doing rep work? Like this close grip bench, I'm doing sets of 10 here. Why are we doing this? We're doing this for hypertrophy purposes. Okay, and while we do understand, those of us who understand this know that hypertrophy and strength cannot be separated. There's something like 90% overlap in any given person. In other words, for you as a person, we're not talking about your friend who's really strong for his size. That's irrelevant, because this rule would apply to him too. For you as a person, 90% of your strength is going to come directly from the amount of lean tissue that you've stacked onto your body and where you've put it. Okay? Where you put it matters. Obviously, if you haven't built the correct musculature up for an exercise, you're going to be weaker on it. The more muscle you build towards all the movers of that exercise, obviously you're going to be better at it, unless you have one of them really lagging. So hypertrophy, this is where we build our strength. So 90% of your strength will come from hypertrophy. All the other factors, technique, skill, learning to max out, working on explosiveness, all this various specificity of training is only going to count for about 10% of your total strength. For you as a person, your muscle mass is going to determine 90% of it. So we do hypertrophy work like this. And again, that's a misnomer because people say, well, can we call it that? Sure, because it's biased in that direction. In other words, we could argue that certain training styles and rep ranges are biased towards hypertrophy, although they will still make you stronger on your 1 rep max. And some training is biased towards lifting a 1 rep max that will give you hypertrophy, but a lot less. Okay. If you want to be as strong as possible, you obviously need both. And you need both in the appropriate amounts. This should be common sense to anyone who understands training. Sorry guys, you're not going to get ultra strong probably doing a bunch of 1 to 3 rep work. You're going to cap on that eventually. You're going to hit a wall and you're never going to improve because you didn't put in the volume and get big. Okay. By that same token, guys who get big and do nothing but hypertrophy work, you're going to have to learn how to lift heavy too. Or you're just not going to be that strong. And how you go about it, we could argue whether peaking is better or whether running max effort work year round is better. I think the latter is. It's my opinion, says me. It's what I do. And I put my money where my mouth is. That's what I do with paying clients. That's what I do with my own training. So over to the point though. Hypertrophy work. Well, the closed grip bench is easier on our shoulders. We move the weight a longer distance. Let's come back over to the other thing. The wider grip shortens the range of motion. Well, when we're doing hypertrophy work, we want to get a longer stretch shortening cycle. It's generally preferable to move the weight a longer distance for a couple of reasons. Some people would say, well, you're just having to reduce weight. What if the joint angles are still the same, degrees of all the joint angles? You're just making it harder. Yeah, because we're moving at a further distance, every rep with the same weight requires more work. It also means that to do the same reps, you're going to have to use a lighter weight. You have to use a lighter weight. You're still going to do more work. Moving it all through a further distance, it's slightly easier to recover from. Right? Up to a point. Now, I don't recommend on certain exercises people will try to extrapolate that over to, oh, if you just do really high rep squats, that's easy to recover from. No, they're absolutely not. Because you don't want to do high tonnage on a back squat. Best of luck to you if you think you're going to do that regularly and recover. Okay? I don't recommend people do high reps at all on back squats. Probably not wise. There's a time when I recommended it, but I came to realize further in life that it just doesn't work. It's problematic from a recovery side. Unless you're willing to up the dose, bro. And there's still more efficient ways to train. But with the benching, it's a different beast. We don't have the same issues regarding our cardiovascular fatigue becoming an issue. We don't have the axial loading component. So realistically, it's not a super high fatigue exercise, all things considered, but it can be tougher on your shoulders. And if we go over to the closed grip, for all of our volume training, or closer grips, closed grip is relative, isn't it? It's a relative term. Do a lot more closed grip work, particularly as we get more advanced. It's going to create a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. It's also going to be easier on your shoulders. And if it's easier on our shoulders, we can do more training. And I think people need to remember that when we start getting fatigue, we start getting overuse problems, we start getting inflammation in joints and tendons and everything else, it's actually harder to keep training. Right? Training through pain, not discomfort, but training through pain actually taxes you. It taxes your recovery. This is one of the reasons so many guys need pre-workouts and all this other stuff. Right? Poor fatigue management. And then they can't get through their workouts without something to kind of push them. And stuff like that can be part of it, right? They're having to push through a little bit of pain. Well, we don't want to push through pain. We train around pain. We don't train through pain. And that's something I can tell you as someone who's in their 40s still lifting heavy. You guys see me deadlifting over 600, squatting well over 500. In my 40s, the reason I get away with that, I know not to train through pain. We train around it. Right? And we need to pick the movements for most of our volume that do not create inflammation and pain. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.